Hey folks, MixRPD here. So in my last video, we looked at basic vocal compression. So I'm going to link that in the description, but we just looked at the basic parameters and dealt with an example here. So in this one, I want to look at, there's the example, we can just have a listen.
Move in all directions. Don't try to stay still.
Okay, so it sounds like that. So I just want to go over what the other processing I might do on a vocal before the compressor, because a compressor might act like a magnifier, you could say, right? You're sort of blowing it up when it goes through, so it's bigger on the other end. So any issues, you know, they're going to get bigger, right? So you might want to deal with them beforehand. It's a pretty good idea. So let's look at this EQ here. So we'll have a listen with it on.
Move in all directions. Don't try to stay still.
Now let's bypass it.
Move in all directions. Don't try to stay still.
Okay, so it sounds a little different, right? Let's look at what we're doing here. So this is a pretty common thing, just getting out the unnecessary low end before it goes through the compressor, right? Let's have a listen in solo. Right, so that's all
Don't try to stay
muddy stuff, right? Okay, so, I mean, and if you look at the visualizer, not that you should look too much, because it can kind of fool you sometimes, but...
made cold by the chill.
Right? You can see right around 200 hertz, that peak coming up right around here.
Made cold by the chill.
That's sort of the bottom of the voice, the fundamental, the lowest pitch in the voice, and below that it's just kind of mud
Move in
and
all
air,
directions.
all this down here. So we don't need that. We don't need to be putting that through the compressor. That's just common sense stuff, right? And then up from there we have this guy here. So let's listen to this one. So that sounds pretty muddy too, right?
Separate.
So, but this is a necessary part of the voice. So you can see here, I'm not just cutting it out or anything like that. And I'm not even really reducing it. I'm actually boosting it slightly by 0.5 decibel. But what I'm doing to reduce it is this dynamic cut here. So this is just controlling it when it gets overly loud, because as you can hear, it's kind of muddy, right? So this is an important concept in pretty much every modern vocal, where the low part of the voice is important, of course, because that's responsible for the person sounding like themselves, the personality of the voice. But if it gets overly thick, like you're hearing there, the muddiness, well, it doesn't sound particularly professional. So that's the solution that I'm often using, right? Is to sometimes cut it just a little bit, or in this case, boost it just slightly, but reduce it dynamically. So it's cutting it when it's getting overly loud. So let's move on to the next point here. We'll have a listen. Ooh, that sounds nasty. So all of these, so both of these points here are what I would call resonances, right? So you can hear how that, I don't know, how would I describe that one? It's kind of like a squawky, it's not a nice sound, right? So I'm just, not particularly narrow here. Like this one's pretty narrow. The next one that we'll go to, this one's a little wider, but yeah, you can sort of see that point in the voice there. But I just identified that, like, let's turn it off.
Move in all directions. Don't try to stay still.
And on.
Move in all directions. Don't try to stay still.
So I think you can hear a pretty drastic difference in the voice there. And yeah, I mean, it's just, I identified that as maybe something that the room was doing or something like that. But I think he sounds much more natural without that. I just sort of cut it out a little bit, 6-7 dB.
Move in all directions.
Right? Versus...
move in all directions.
That sounds better to me. Anyways, your opinions may vary down in the comments, etc. But one other thing I want to point out here is that I have the auto gain function on here. I don't know why we have the help on, but I have the auto gain function on, and that so that all of this stuff here is sort of making it quieter, right? We're cutting frequencies out, so the auto gain function is going to be trying to level out the difference, so it's not just getting a lot quieter. That can help with perception sometimes, especially when you're boosting a lot, because because like when you boost, it gets louder, right? And that can fool you into thinking it's better when actually it's just louder. So something to think about. Let's move on to this next point here, this much more narrow resonance. So you can hear there, it's so narrow, it doesn't even really sound like the voice, but it's just like a whistling sound. So let's turn it off.
Move in all directions. Don't try to stay still.
And back on.
Move in all directions. Don't try to stay still.
All right. Whistling sound. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily expect you guys to be able to hear that stuff right away. It's taken me a long time to be able to learn how to hear resonances well, especially when they're not super obvious. I felt like that was part of my game I had to work on a few years ago, and I have been. So yeah, I'm better at that now. You can hear it, you can't, it's okay. We move on. So these two are sort of like sibilance regions, right? So this bottom one is when we have overrepresentation of like CH consonants, so ch, that kind of sound. So let's have a listen.
Directions.
So it's
Separate
that
by silence.
type of sound. And then this one above, so that one's like about 5 kilohertz, and this one's about 8.5 above, and this one's for the S's, right? This.
Don't try to stay still.
So let's hear that part, that stay still. Let's try to stay still. So you can hear there.
Separate by silence.
And then separate by silence. So we got a lot of S's going on, and they're pretty sizzly, right? So this is just to control all that going into the compressor, right? That's what we're dealing with here. So yeah, I mean, just some common sense moves maybe. And then one more thing I'm going to show you here that you can do on Pro Q3 anyways. Not an ad, but just a demonstration here. So with this gain scale slider, it's like an intensity slider, right? So I can sort of back this off or exaggerate it. So I'm going to try to back this off and see what it sounds like.
Move in all directions. Don't try to stay still. Separate by silence. Made cold by the chill.
All right. So that's at like 64% intensity. So basically it's taking all these cuts here and whatever I'm doing and just only doing it 64% of the amount I'm doing. So here, let's listen to the difference between that.
Move in all directions. Don't try to stay still.
Versus.
Move in all directions. Don't try to stay still.
Right? So, you know, without the context of the backing track, which, to be honest, I didn't want to mix this entire backing track just to do this example. So we're just doing this in solo, which probably makes it a little easier to hear anyway, because these are just tracks I pulled off the internet. Hopefully that helps you determine what you might want to do before a compressor. I can just quickly show that there's also some de-essers here. There's 2 de-essers, one before and one after the compressor. So this is just to go in tandem with these curves here. Just helping to reduce the sibilance range a little bit more before and after the compressor. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. Hope this helps and have a good time mixing.